It usually takes a 5-10 seconds to get live. Okay, well, I think we might be live now, so let's go ahead and get it going. Hi, I'm Mike Safe, and with World Class Coaching, and we've got Alex Mason here and Keith Scarlett. And today's debate is going to be looking at the difference between a back four versus a back three. Most teams in the world tend to play with a back four, I would say, but recently there's been a lot of success with a back three. England national team tried it for a while. I don't know if they stuck with it, but Chelsea won the championship, the English Premier League championship, with a back three. So there's definitely pros and cons for both, and we're going to talk about those. I've got Alex Mason here from Omaha and Keith Scarlett, who's in Indianapolis. So let's just start off, guys. Again, we'll do a 30-second intro. Just tell these guys who you are, a bit of background, what club you coach at, that kind of thing. So let's go start off with Alex.
Alex Mason, I'm coaching for Omaha, Nebraska. Started my coaching career in England with my FA badge, and then when I came over, I went through all the courses. We're a club, obviously, in Omaha, Nebraska, with about 2,200 players. We cover everything from recreational right the way through to the competitive. Currently, we're in the DA, and that's where we're at the moment. So, been coaching there within the club for 26 years, I believe now.
26 years at the same club, Alex.
Getting old, mate.
It's that must be that first name of Alex, like you and Ferguson stay at the club for a long time. Okay, Keith, let everybody know where you're from and where you coach.
Originally from Indianapolis, Indiana. I've got coaching experience at the collegiate level, 10 years at the college level, another 10, 15 years at the club level. I also have spent some time overseas coaching with Perth Glory Women in Perth, Australia, and with the Thrauder FC in Reykjavik, Iceland. And that's about it.
Okay. Well, today we're going to look at the difference between a back four and a back three. We're going to look at it both ways, from a defending point of view, and which we'll do first, I guess, and then we'll look at it, if we have time, from a building out of the back point of view. So let's just go with the overall basic, Alex. Why do you choose to play with a back four as opposed to a back three or any other number?
I think obviously numerically you've got 4 players, so you've got an additional defender. If you were to play a 3, you can cover obviously sideline to sideline. You have the option for multiple shapes within that back 4. Going back to the good old days, you can go with the stopper sweeper or attacking centre back and a covering centre back, and the 2 fullbacks. I think the strength of it is the ability to cover all 4 components of the game. So the 4 principles of defending with that group of 4, and that gives us the advantage, I believe, against maybe a 2 attacker or even a 3 attacker.
Okay, and so Keith, you've played with a back 4, but did you recently change to a back 3?
No, I played with the back 3 when I played in college, and played with the back 4 when I played semi-professionally.
Okay, and when you coach your teams, have you always done a back 3, or have you mixed back 4 and back 3 and mixed it up?
If I have the right personnel, I'd like to use a back 3. If the personnel is correct, it all depends on the personnel for me. I like to have the extra numbers going forward. I like to supply the width from the midfield, particularly with the 5 in the midfield. Have a little bit more vertical depth in the midfield play, particularly in the center of the park. Like to isolate the half spaces.
So you're one of the main reasons you like a back three over a back four is from a possession perspective, an attacking perspective, rather than a defending perspective.
Yes, I like the chaos that it causes. It's a more possession focused focused formation, focused system of play. If you utilize it correctly, it can be very difficult to defend because of the supporting angles that it offers, and the different ways that it supports itself. It's organized chaos.
Now,
If done correctly, if implemented correctly.
now, what about from a defending perspective, though? Does that leave you challenged sometimes from a defending point of view?
It does lead challenge on the flanks, especially in behind the outside backs. It's difficult to defend with. You really have to pin your attacking players with your backs. Got to pin the attacking players, and particularly they got to pin them into the half spaces and deny the inside angles. It becomes difficult in that aspect. You have to play some type of a mixture of man marking and zonal. You can't get stretched too wide because the space will open up in the central lanes. You also have to have the right center back to play it, because the center back's got to be a stud to a certain extent because of the amount of ground they have to cover. But you have a lot of support that comes in from the midfield because the numbers are in the midfield. And so if you have three central midfielders, one of those midfielders is always coming back to help. And so, you get your fourth defender that way, or the outside midfielders coming back to help as well. So you get a fourth defender coming back in that aspect. But it really focuses a lot on positioning of your backs, not getting too wide, again, and really the positioning on the man marking aspect of pinning those attacking players in the right positioning, the body positioning, and being pinned.
Okay, so Alex, I'm like you. I've actually done both. I've 90% of the time I'll play with a back four. That's my first choice. I do it slightly different than others in that my fullbacks just attack like crazy, so it leaves us open quite a bit. But I remember one time I had a team, and it was a real good team, but they weren't very strong as in centre midfield. So I ended up putting I went up with a 5-man midfield, which left me 3 at the back. So that was my reason for choosing to play with 3 at the back, not because I preferred to, it's because I just needed more help in midfield. Now, when you've got a back four, you like you said, you can play different ways. You can play zonally. You can play with a covering center defender. When you're defending, if you're defending with just the opposition's playing with 2 forwards, do you change your back four? How do you defend with your back four? Does that allow more freedom for the fullbacks or more freedom for one of the center defenders to go up? How does that work?
I think the key, first of all, is how mobile are the 2 forwards? Are they literally playing off of each other, i.e. their shoulders, or are they playing as 2 separate forwards? If they play as 2 separate forwards, we've almost got to stay home because of, you need cover in them circumstances. If they're playing somewhat very tight, and obviously we regain possession, it's very easy for us then to go from a defensive situation into an attacking situation with the fullbacks. It really is going to be determined on them 2 forwards and how much they work off of each other, Mike.
Okay, and what about if you're up against 3? Is that just a straightforward, okay, if I'm up against 3, if the other team's playing 3 attackers, do I just go zonal with a flat line across there, or how do you do that?
Yeah, you definitely pinch in one of the fullbacks to make sure that one of the centre backs becomes almost a zonal player, a covering player. The risk there is we would play a very high line then, try and keep them a little bit higher, get them outside of what we would call, the shooting range. But then that's where your goalkeeper is part of that back four, making sure that their toes ready to come out.
Okay, and here's another question, which is, what about if you are now, if the team you're playing is stronger than you and you're defending most of the time, then yeah, you've got your back four, you've got your midfield there helping. But if you are in a game where, let's say, you're dominating possession and you've got control of the game, who would you give more freedom to then? More freedom to your fullbacks, more freedom to your centre backs, or how do you deal with that?
Well, I think like depending on the opposition setup, in a perfect scenario, one of the centre backs would go forward and release that holding mid. Then that holding mid would now become almost a higher, like a number 8, and then you can even squeeze a number 8 as a third forward. The great thing about the 4 backs is it gives you that flexibility. You can actually move players. If they are more dominant on their right side, obviously your left fullback is going to have to be very tight, and one of your centre backs will then cover. That still is that right side in a possession game for us.
Okay, so that's interesting, because the way I played, I always loved to play out wide. That's where I thought the spaces were. That's where I thought we could get good matchups and play out wide. So if we were the stronger team, my fullbacks just used to go up like crazy, and my wide midfielders would end up playing us forward. So we'd end up maybe playing something like a 2-4-4.
Right.
But I never, like I said, my deal was I was always wanting to play out wide rather than build through the center as much as you guys do.
Right. Well, remember last week, Mike, we said about the horseshoe back four, where you 2 centre backs that are playing almost off the edge of the 18, and the 2 fullbacks that are very high. That still gives us that opportunity. That doesn't go away. We're not going to set up in a flat back 4 and maintain that when we're in control of the game.
Okay. All right. So Keith, when you've got your back 3, and you're defending, so how do you organize the midfield to support that? Do you have the 2 fullbacks coming back to make it a 5-man back line? Do you have one of your center midfielders dropping back to make it a 4-man back line, or do they always stay in front of the back 3 and just try and block those gaps and support them that way?
Ideally, they would stay in front. In an ideal situation, they would stay in front and clog up the space and clog up the lanes and make the life easy for the 3 backs. But usually that doesn't happen. Typically what happens is that, one of the midfielders has to drop back, and typically it's one of the central midfielders that drops back and becomes a 4th defender.
Okay. So your wide players then, they basically stay wide and they've got more of a possession responsibility, attacking responsibility than defending. It's one of the center mids who has the main responsibility for helping out when needed. Is that right?
Yes. I mean, sometimes we get the outside flank players. They come back and help defensively, particularly when a ball is played wide. When a ball is sprayed wide, and either one of the outside backs strays out to pressure it, and then one of the outside mids may slide into that space and cover that. But sometimes that'll happen, and the field needs to be balanced out a little bit. That's where that interchanging chaos I talked about earlier talks about, where the players just interchange themselves in these little triangles, so to speak, on the field. But typically, it's ideally we want one of the central midfielders to slide back defensively.
Okay, so how do you deal with it if you're coming up against a team that plays with 3 attackers? You've got a back 3. It's 1-on-1. There's no spare player. How do you deal with that? Are you forced to change, or do you stick with the 3 and see how things go and develop from there?
It depends on your personnel. Typically, you're forced to change, unfortunately, because of the number situation and the coverage. But if you have the right personnel, you can get away with playing with man marking and manning up and playing You just have to play kind of a mixture of man market and zone. If the attacking wise they spread out wide, you don't want to stretch your outside backs too far wide. You want to play a bit of zone on the flanks and just keep an eye on them that way. And then play the spacing you play is the half spaces. Use the half space of the field. Use that as your spacing measurement to kind of play in that zone of the field. But typically what happens is you have to make some kind of adjustment. Either you have to retract back a midfielder for more responsibility, or you have to actually shift your formation and play more of a back four.
Okay. Now, when you say it depends on the players that you have available, what attributes are you looking for when you've got a back three? When you're just playing with three at the back, what ideally are you looking for in your players?
Well, physically, you're looking for speed and size, the ability to close down quickly, the ability to cover space, size, the ability to win, the battle close quarters, the ability to win close quarter duels, the ability to have good closing angles, the ability to win balls in close, the ability to channel to play players off the ball. Tactically, you're looking for intelligence. The mindset of being able to read the game well, read plays developing, seeing players and to know when do I pressure close, when do I pull off. You're looking for those types of attributes.
Okay, Alex, when you're going to back four, you've got two center defenders, I'm presuming, and two fullbacks. So, what do you look for in your center defenders? What do you look for in your fullbacks?
The two central defenders, obviously, like Keith said, that the presence, the physicality when needed, the ability to win tackles, the ability to win headers, most importantly. Size across the back four with a back four isn't that important. You can play a smaller player as a fullback, especially if you're a very kind of possession-driven team. Obviously, because we have the width of the four, we do allow players to get on players' shoulders and press. So we will press, understanding that if there is a mistake, we still have an additional player that can clean up.
So, okay, so let's talk about from a training session. Let's look at a training session. So you're going to play zonally with a back four. How do you get the back four players to understand their responsibilities within that back four zone? And how do you have any typical small-sided games or drills that you use that help them understand that? Because that was one of the things I always found difficult was, getting them to understand the concept of zonal. Man marking was easy. Just go stick with that person, stay on the shoulder, stay close with them. If they go out wide, you let them go out wide a little bit and just keep your eye on them. But you don't go all the way out wide with them, but just keep your eye on them from an inside position. But zonally, it was always a case of, you had to understand your own responsibility, but also make sure that the person next to you was understanding their responsibility as well. So I always found that more difficult and more of a challenge. How do you do that?
Obviously, the setup in a training environment would break it up into three zones. So a left side, a right side, and a central. We would start off with individual players in each zone, attackers. And we would start off where they're just basically the fullbacks are attacked as individuals and the two centre backs are attacked as a pair. Once we introduce that second forward, so now you've got two players attacking that now can pass to each other. That's when we really start getting to the zonal part. I think the key for young players for zonal understanding is, one, they're a game awareness. You don't allow a player to run across your back shoulder without passing that player on. It's very easy for a player to say, right, I'm zoning. I can see the player. I can see their player with the ball. It's the player that comes off that back shoulder that then has to be passed on. And I think that's where, depending on the personnel, it becomes a real challenge, because zonal's easy when they have possession midfield. Zonal becomes a little more difficult when they're actually attacking in that final third, especially down the flanks.
Well, what age group would you say that they kind of pick up on that a lot better and kind of understand it and can manage it better?
We definitely 2005, so 15s. We would spend a lot of time with that, and I think obviously the 2006s, the 14s, it will basically be an interacting drill, i.e., not zonal and only zonal. It will be where they can go man marking and then try and explain that. But at 15, we will definitely be doing zonal defending.
Okay, so it's kind of that maturity, when kids start maturing, that they kind of understand responsibility a little bit more, I guess.
Game knowledge, Mike. It's down to game knowledge.
And game knowledge, yeah. So
yeah.
Okay, so all right, Keith. So you got a back three. Now, if you're up against two forwards, do you play a man marking for those two forwards and a spare player, or do you play zonally? How does that work with a back three?
It's a bit of a mixture, because you don't want to get stretched too far wide and open up that space, because you're not playing four in the back. You don't have the extra body in the middle of the park if you get stretched out wide. So you man mark in the center of the park, and then you play a bit of zone as they stretch out wide. So your outside backs don't follow the strikers, the two front runners, as they go all the way wide. They don't follow them. So if one of the attacking players, like if it pulls a Cristiano Ronaldo and goes all the way to the touchline, you don't follow them all the way out there to mark. So you kind of let them play a bit, and you play them more zonally out there. And so you kind of play that space a bit more than you would following all the way out there to man mark. But if they play more centrally, again, I use that term half space, because the half space is your measuring stick. Is that as they come inside into the half space area, that's when you begin to more pick them up as the man mark.
So, if your back three would you describe your back three as a center defender, two fullbacks, or would you describe it as three center backs?
It can be described as either. I mean, because that center back is going to stay centrally unless they come out to cover for someone, and unless they have to cover to the outside. That center back's going to stay centrally. So you could describe it either way you want. You could have the two outside backs play more centrally in connection with that center back, or you could have it be two fullbacks playing off that center back.
And so is that dependent on the opposition you're playing, on how they're playing with their forwards?
Yes.
Okay, so just going back to that, if they're playing with two forwards again. So if they're playing with two forwards and their two forwards are central up the field, would you tend to go man for man with a free player? Or would you tend to just stick with three zonal ones pretty tight in the middle rather than your fullbacks out wide?
Well, if their two forwards were central, we'd man mark up. We'd pin them very tightly, as tightly as possible, as we physically could, without getting overrun or getting run by. But if one of those forwards decided to run out wide, then we would leave that player. We wouldn't pin him as tightly. So we keep our shape in the middle of the park. We want to maintain the three central presence in the center of the park. We don't want to leave two players isolated in the center of the park. If we can get away with that, we don't want to leave two players isolated in the middle of the park and leave them hung out to dry. So we want to maintain a shape of three in the middle. And so, if their two forwards are in the middle of the park, we'll pin them up. But if they one of them drift wide or they both drift wide, then we'll kind of go to a zonal system.
Right. If the two of them are up the middle, and as you say, you pin them up, so you're man marking them. What does the third defender do? Does he kind of hang back in like a supporting role, or is he on whatever side of the field the possession may be coming from? How does that?
Yeah, he's covering possession side. So if the ball's
Okay.
on the right side, he's gonna cover possession side. You know, he's not gonna we don't want him dripping too far back where he's playing like a sweeper. We don't want that happening because then we get a lot of space opened up in front that it's hard to cover. But he's gonna be covering possession side, which side the ball's on.
Okay. Let's talk about midfield help. So now, Alex, you got a back four. You're defending. Now you've played with a 4-4-2, so four midfielders. You now play with a 4-2-3-1. So when you're defending now, how do you get your midfielders to support your back line? How do you organise that?
Obviously, it's understanding the formation of the opponent first of all, and making sure that the matchups are there. So if we're playing a 4-4-2 and they're playing a 4-4-2, it really becomes now almost like a matchup. If we're a 4-2-3-1 and they're a 4-4-2, then we've got to be very aware of the wider players of that midfield four. And that's where, depending on the formation, depending on the personnel, you can get really creative within your own squad. In a 4-4-2, it's very simple to have two blocks, and especially with the double block in the central part of the park with the 4-5 and the 6 and the 8.
Okay. And as far as spacing from your midfielders to your back line, what kind of spacing do you go for?
To be honest, it can be if the opposition's a very good team and our 6 is having to kind of hang back, that 6 may be playing on a point off of our 4 and 5. If they're not pushing, then obviously one of our centre backs can now go forward. So that the connection between one of the centre backs and one of the holding mids could be almost about 15 yards, almost where they could start to play off of each other, but close enough that they can then do a dual responsibility.
Okay. And Keith, what about you with so you've got your back three, and how do you, we talked about this a little bit earlier, but I think we should go over it again. How do you have your midfielders support your back three when you're defending? You're not in possession, the other team's pressing. How do you get them to support your back three?
Ideally want our support to come from one of the central midfielders, one of the 3 central midfielders playing in a five across the middle, but if that doesn't work, then we want support to come from one of the flanking midfielders, one of the outside mids. We really don't want our 6 to do it if we don't have to. We want our 6 to stay in their role and be the one that does all the creation. In this system, I'd always like to let the 6 run free and do whatever they want to do, go wherever they want. To have the system gives them the freedom to go do whatever they want to do, have a green light to go wherever. And so ideally, this is the 6 that does that. But one of the other 2 central midfielders or one of the 2 outside midfielders comes back to help, depending on where the ball's played to or where the possession is generated.
Okay, so now let's look at what situation gives you the most trouble. So Keith, when you're up against a team, what kind of formation system of play are they using that's going to give you with a back three the most trouble in general?
3 front runners. Any system running 3 front runners is really going to cause issues. Specifically, a team that runs a 3-4-3 is really going to cause issues, because if I'm trying to run three 3 backs, 5 midfielders, and 2 front runners. Then we're numbers even across the back, and then we're numbers down across the front because they got 3 in the back, we're running 2, and so it kind of negates our midfield. It negates our midfield a little bit because we've got to pull somebody from the midfield back to defend. There's 3 front runners, leaving 4, and then we have a difficult time pushing somebody forward to attack their 3 backs, to help with our 2 front runners because we've got to pull back to defend. So anyone running a three front runner system would cause issues. Or any team that's able to run 2 front runners but get a lot of flood going forward would also cause some issues for us.
Okay, so yeah, that makes sense. Now, Alex, you can cover that better with a back 4. But what systems do you think make life difficult if you're playing with a back 4?
I agree. Obviously, from a number standpoint, any team that plays with 3 forwards can really isolate each of the defenders, can separate them. But we've played teams that have played a 4-5-1, and the lone striker has caused us absolute problems just because obviously mobility, their ability on the ball, their desire to want to link up with players coming in from the midfield. I'm not sure that it's any one formation that gives us the problem, but just from a numerical standpoint, the 3, because it really could give us a man-to-man marking role in certain areas, especially central.
What about from a style point of view then? Is it a style that gives you more problems than others? Like it, is it like you said that you've got 1 forward up there causing all kinds of problems, or is it attacking from wide or whatever?
Yeah, the latter, Mike. The teams that go down the flanks and pull one of them fullbacks out, and now you've really got basically a back 3. If it's one of their midfields that's making that run with the ball, you've now got a man-to-man marking role 3v3. So that's the right. You're very concerned about teams that come down them flanks.
So that's why my teams used to give you problems, then, Alex. Is that right?
Oh, Mikey, come on now.
well, the thing is, it's interesting you say that because for me, my style of play, I just used to love everything. My whole deal with my teams was pass the ball around, get the ball out wide in as fewer passes as you can, and then when you're wide, if you're 1-on-1, go take them on and go for it. If you're not,
right.
if you're too far away from goal or it's not enough space, then pass it away. But I just used to love attacking down the flanks. I thought that used to cause all kinds of problems, and you just kind of said that.
but Mike, you're also. We come from a background of when the 7 and 11, the wide midfielders were true attacking forwards. They would get the ball and they would run at them fullbacks all day long. The game's changed now. Longer passing, more diagonal passing, more kind of possession. But you get a 7-11 that wants to run at defenders. That's just as good as playing with 2 or 3 forwards.
Well, Marino used to do that with his first spell at Chelsea. He used to have Aaron Robin and who else? He just used to love having those wingers going attacking him down there. And that paid dividends. But okay, right. So anyway, Keith, let's get on with you. So what kind of is there a style of play that gives you more trouble than if just the numerical numbers up there? Is it like a long ball play, a counter-attacking style, or what tends to give you more trouble?
Your direct style will cause us the most issues because we try to play a possession game. We try to play a short ball. We try to play, try to keep it on the floor as much as possible, and use the numerical advantage in the midfield going forward. But if we can get caught up in transition doing that, and so a team that plays very direct and a counter-attacking team that will get out and get at you quickly can cause us some problems with the 3-back and the way that we try to play.
Okay. Yeah. Well, that makes sense if you got fewer numbers at the back and they can get that ball up there quickly. Yeah, that definitely makes sense. Well, let's just change now. Let's look at we've kind of explored the defending side of it. Let's have a look at now playing out of the back. Keith, you said you like to keep the ball on the ground and pass. Do you build out of the back with that back three?
We'll try to. We'll try to. Sometimes because of the amount of pressure that we're under, we're forced to just release the ball and get rid of it. We'll try to though. The way that we're set up with the five midfielders is that there's a lot of options out that we can get the ball out. A lot of options out. We get the ball out. The outside midfielders will tuck back, and become support for our outside backs. There's an extra midfielder or two in the center of the park that we can release the ball to, and so we'll look to play the ball out of the back on the ground, if preferably, unless we're under a lot of pressure. But a lot of the time we are under a lot more pressure than we'd like because we're playing with the three in the defensive third of the field until we can get the ball forward and take advantage of our numerical superiority.
Okay, so so let's just break this down a little bit. You've got your goalkeeper's got it. They've just hit a long ball over. It's run through to the goalkeeper. The goalkeeper's got it. He's going to play it out of the back. He's going to, what options does he have? Do you like him to try and give it to one of your centre backs, one of your fullbacks, or try and miss those and do the wide midfielders come back to try and receive the ball off him? What options do you give your players for that?
Well, the outside mids will tuck back and provide width. There's an option there on both sides. You have the option of the center back. You have the option of the outside backs, a little bit narrower. Again, playing off those half spaces. You have the option there. So there's at least 5 different options you can play through there. And if those aren't available, which sometimes they're not, then the option is to go a little bit deeper down the field. And there's where we have 2 other options with the center of the park. And then if he has to go longer to our front runners.
So you don't have.
But it's the tucking of those outside mids is key. Those outside mids have got to tuck down off the shoulders of the outside backs. They've got to supply that width. They've got to tuck down off those shoulders. They've got to be down low and off the shoulders, down towards the corner of the park.
So just so they understand this, your goalkeeper's got the ball. Your 2 wide defenders don't spread out all the way wide and look to touch the sidelines to receive a pass. That's your wide midfielders drop back for that. Your fullbacks will go out wide, but not the full width of the pitch. Is that how I understand it?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. All right. So Alex, back 4. How would you build out of the back with a back 4? What options do you give your players?
Obviously, goalkeeper to fullbacks. That's probably our primary playing out the back. If it's a long ball over the top and they don't have a runner, our goalkeeper will obviously collect the ball. Our entire back line will kind of race out about 30 yards, allowing the goalkeeper then to play the ball at their own feet, and then they can take that space. We sometimes bypass our back 4 and go straight to our number 6 that they can then play the ball back to the 2 centre backs and let them play. Because there's obviously 4, you've got a nice number of players. You can use either flank centrally, the goalkeeper is part of that supporting player as well. So it gives us a lot of kind of variations. And again, it's all going to come down to the opposition.
Okay, so your fullbacks would you say that's your first choice, is get it out wide to a fullback?
Yeah, because it makes them have to, it makes them have to switch their field and obviously try and close down. It creates more movement from the opposition. And if we can have a player that's in a good position, a disconnected player that's still available, then we can eliminate more of their players by playing that longer ball.
Okay, so let's look at this example now, just for other coaches who are, playing out of the back. So you play it out wide to your fullback. The goalkeeper plays it out wide to the fullback.
Yeah.
Fullback gets closed down pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And he takes a little too long in making his decision. At the time it's played out to the fullback, do you have one of your centre backs drop back to receive a pass, an outlet pass from the fullback if he's under pressure, or do you have the goalkeeper be that outlet if he's under pressure and can't make a positive pass?
Yeah, absolutely. Both options, Mike. So one, if they're very deep, let's say level with the 18, it will go from player back to the goalkeeper. If let's say they're a little higher, 30 yards out, being pressed, it will go back to a centre back that will just drop off.
Okay. What about you, Keith? You got that question now. So goalkeeper plays the ball and let's say plays it out, and one of your wide midfielders comes back and he's the outlet, so he's got possession of the ball. He looks to move forward, but he slows down a little bit quicker than he thought. So he needs to do an outlet pass now, a safe one, either play it back a little bit or all the way back to the goalkeeper. So when the ball goes out to the wide player in that instance, what do you instruct your three defenders to do? Is it your fullback who's going to drop back, or do you have your centre back drop back to be the outlet pass and your fullback pushes forward? In that instance, what would you do?
We'd instruct the center back to drop back, and then have the fullback push forward to be an outlet. So we'd maintain our three again, maintain our three again, but this time the three would be with the outside mid, the center back, and the fullback.
Okay, so in both instances, then you're both doing the same thing. Ball goes out wide, centre back drops back to be an outlet pass if it's needed. And depending on where you are on the field, if you're further back, then they can just give it back to the goalkeeper. So let's look at possession now when we're further up the field. So we're further up the field. Let's say we're just entering the attacking third, or we're in the attacking third, but not in the penalty area. We're in there, and we're passing the ball around to try and break down the other team. So Alex, you've got 4 defenders. So you've got possession of the ball, and you're trying to create a chance. You're in the attacking third. What do you expect your 4 defenders to do? Let's say you've got the ball. Let's say the ball's up wide right, and you're in the attacking third.
So obviously ball side strong. So if the right back's got it, obviously our midfield player would be there to give it a passing angle. Our opposite fullback would come across diagonal. So they would literally come, basically a security. So if that right midfield player is almost in a position where they could be closed down, our left back will be almost playing in front of our 4 and 5. We'll be playing in a point. So if the ball is cleared out, it will be our fullback that gets the ball, because obviously our centre backs are probably marking that lone striker, or even at times 2 players. But we would always have a +1, Mike, in a defensive situation, even in our possession.
Okay, what about thinking now from attacking point of view, though, Alex? So you've got possession. You're going to keep. Let's say you keep possession. So you're not concerned. You're trying to score a goal. You're not concerned about having too many back defending. So let's say your right midfielder's got the ball on the right side, and you're 30 yards out from goal, and you're passing the ball around, and you're trying to create a chance. What do you ask of your back 4 in those instances to help create more numbers up front and create overload and create a chance?
Yeah, if the wide midfield players are a little kind of tucked in, we would definitely make sure that the fullbacks are willing to overlap and create that overload. Because of the natural setup of a horseshoe back 4, the 2 fullbacks are already in an attacking mindset. So any chance that they get to kind of overlap and get in that final third, we're going to do it.
Okay, so same situation, Keith. You're attacking. You've got the ball 30 yards out. You're right side of the field. What do you ask of your back 3 to support that attacking situation, or do you?
Well, our different than what he was talking about a little bit is that our our width support is going to come from the outside mids, and so we got to be careful about having our outside backs get too far forward and leaving the numbers low in the back. And so what they'll do is the right outside back will slide forward and outside a bit, and being careful about getting too far forward and too far wide to supply negative support. And then stretching the group of three a bit there. We'll keep our center back a little bit. Keep our center where they are, and the left back will stay where they are the same. But then, other than that, there's not a lot more support we're going to offer. The play is going to continue going forward with the five midfielders and play from there.
Yeah, I guess you've already, when you're playing with a back three, you've already got the extra player in midfield. So you're not asking them to do, you're not asking your back three to provide even more because the support's already there. Okay, let's look at it from a transition point of view. So we've just got this situation now. We've just, Alex, let's go in your situation. Your fullbacks are supporting the attack. We get the ball centrally. We get a shot in there. It's a harmless shot. Goes straight to the goalkeeper. He gets the ball, booms it down the field, and now, how do you talk to your players about transitioning a recovery situation like that?
Obviously, the goalkeeper will be very high in that situation. So the goalkeeper is going to be on the edge of the 18 or even higher, anticipating anything that might be cleared out. Because our opposite fullback has come inside, they're the one that's really going to challenge the air ball. If it eliminates that player and goes on to the last two centre backs, then you really go into what the old school, stopper sweeper. You need the player, the one central defender to be under that ball, and the second one to really be covering the space. While that ball's in transition, the goalkeeper will make their decision on whether it's coming directly to them or they're going to have to drop off and maybe be played the ball back to them as an outlet.
Okay, and let's have a look. Well, actually, Keith, let's go and look at the same situation with you. Then we'll look at another situation. So how would you deal with that situation? You're pushing up, you're attacking. Either one of their defenders clears the ball all the way back, and all of a sudden you're on a fast break defending. How would you deal with that with your back three?
It goes back to that maintaining the group of three shape. We would want to maintain our group of three shape even in transition as much as possible. Like he talked about, the goalkeeper would be playing higher because of our number situation, and so we would have the same decision making that the goalkeeper would have to make as with before. But the three would have to be in a group of three, and there'd be a little bit more depth. So the center back would drop back a bit more in transition. He supply a little bit more depth. And so as the ball was played out, the center back would drop back maybe 10, 15 yards deeper than the outside backs, and be reading the play better from that angle.
Okay, well let's look at another situation. So same attacking situation. You're attacking, you're pushing up, you've got it around the edge of the box, somewhere like that, and now you lose possession. So one of the opposition's defenders has got the ball. He makes a pass, and they make two or three quick passes, and they start advancing up the field. What's your instruction there, transition-wise, Alex, to your players? What do you ask your defenders to do and your midfielders to do, as far as trying to prevent a quick counter attack, I guess?
We all talk about the 6 seconds, win it back in 6 seconds. Obviously, you want the closest player to press the ball. Do they go to press it to try and win the ball back, or do they press it to try and delay? The fullback that maybe has put themselves in an advanced position, obviously you're now looking at them racing back, whether they're the ball side strong or the weak side, i.e. the ball's on the opposite side. They're now going to be racing across diagonally to give a little more cover in the midfield. It's all of the above, Mike. It's all hands on deck by then, and not to take away, the physicality. you're going to present yourself from a very physical standpoint to stop that ball being played.
So do you, in that instance, Alex, are you more of a, most coaches will have the closest person to the ball, put pressure on it to try and slow them down. But what comes after that? Do you tend to ask your players to try and get back behind the ball as quick as we can, or do you tend to ask them to push up on the other opposition players to kind of not allow any outlet passes for the person with the ball? So in other words, do you kind of like to press a little more, or do you kind of like to get them back behind the ball?
Back behind the ball. I think the more players you have behind the ball may force them into a negative pass, i.e. them playing sideways or backwards. If you're trying to press the player on with the ball, they may play a direct ball that eliminates all your covering players. So you want to get behind the ball. You want them to feel that the numerical disadvantage, so they play sideways or backwards.
Okay. All right. Well, same situation for you, Keith. You've just lost possession, 20 yards out, and the other team's got the ball, and they're trying to make a couple of quick passes and get a counter attack going. How do you deal with that?
Get behind the ball, as many bodies behind the ball as possible, and then once behind the ball, when they begin to play negative and when they begin to play the ball backwards, then we take steps forward depending on how much they're playing the ball backwards. If, they play the ball backwards as the ball goes backward, we can begin to press forward that way.
Okay. All right. Well, let's just finish off with I think I meant to ask this question earlier and I didn't, is if you're playing, let's start with you, Alex. If you're coming up with against a team that plays with a back three, how do you like to take advantage of that situation if you can? How do you like to, what tactics do you use when you come up in that situation?
If obviously if you're in a 4-4-2, you've now got an additional player making runs, i.e. the high midfield player, the number 8, or like we said earlier, getting one of the wide flank players to come in. Depending on the spacing of that back three, could really then be where we can be creative with our forwards. We can either duck on one of the back three, i.e. play around them. We can play somewhat separated and isolate the two wider defenders, and then have a runner coming under them through the central part of the field. The back three really gives other teams some good options, but not taking away that, like Keith said, it's the personnel. If you've got 3 good centre backs, you got your work cut out.
Well, okay. Now here's a question for you though. You're coming up against a 3-5-2. So yeah, you've got. You can push up a number to expose that back three, but by doing that, does that not expose you in the midfield, because he's got 3 centre midfielders in there and 2 wide midfielders, and if you're pushing one of your guys up, that's going to leave you exposed in midfield.
Right. Depending on the situation of the game, a longer ball that eliminates that 5 and really puts it forward onto running towards the goal is always going to be an advantage, rather than maybe playing to their feet where the 3 defenders are still behind them. That's where the risk is run, is where you're trying to play a feet. One of the defenders wins the ball, plays into their 5, and then you're outnumbered.
Okay. And so you coming up, Keith, against a back 4, how do you like to play with that?
Well, with using the 3-5-2, we try to get our front runners playing with their backs to goal. They'd be target players. So play the ball into their feet and play the ball back to a midfielder, then catch the midfielders running in behind. Play the ball into feet, play it back, play the ball wide and behind, get our outside mids running in behind the 4, and then playing balls across. Looking for opportunities like that, catching runners in on diagonal balls, catching numerical advantage coming through, getting in behind as much as possible.
Okay, so your wide midfielders then are try and keep the fullbacks occupied, and then you've got man for man on the 2 centre defenders. Is that what you say? Is that one thing that you like to do?
Yeah, to an extent. It's that the two front runners, they're going to play narrow, then they're going to push out and play wide. They're going to variate things, but the key is that the ball wants to come into their feet. They got to be able to handle the ball well with their feet. They got to be able to suck in the defenders, bring the defenders into the end, suck them in. Then once that happens, they play the ball back. They either play the ball out wide to an on running outside midfielder, or play the ball to an on running inside midfielder. Or if the pressure's not there, turn and go at it themselves to keep those defenders on their toes, questioning what's going to happen next. And once they have that done, and they've got so many different options. Again, they can play it wide, they can play it central, they can turn and go on their own. We have an extra midfielder body at least who should always have one running through the middle, trying to be occupied. And so if the central backs, if the two center backs are playing those strikers, then the question becomes, then who's going to pick up a midfielder running through the middle? If they're, all right, and then the question becomes, all right, then we isolate the outside backs who got to pick up the runners running on the outside. And so it really comes down to a matter of those front runners being able to handle the ball at their feet.
I understand what you're saying. It's almost we can choose the formation that we like to play with, the system of play that we like. I agree with you, but there is a sense of it depends on the personnel that you've got. I talk about the 4-4-2.
Yes.
I used to play with a 4-4-2, and my thing was just get out wide. Now, the problem we had with that was we used to get exposed in the middle of the field. I'd have two center midfielders. Well, most times we were playing against teams with three. But if we had the better players, or we were more of the possession, then they were more concerned about having to defend our wide attacks, which meant the middle of the field wasn't really a factor. But the other way around, if the team we were playing kept getting hold of the ball, and we're trying to, all of a sudden we keep getting exposed in the middle of the field. So it's if one team, I think, can push their personality and their style and their dominance on the other team, then no matter whether you're playing with a back three or a back four or a midfield 3 or 4 or 5, you can always find weaknesses in the other system. Would you agree on that, Alex?
Yeah, your formation, Mike, is your starting point. So the moment you say we're going out and we're going to play in this formation, it's the game that dictates the movement of the players. And that's where you've got to have the flexibility. And obviously the players have got to have the understanding that they can change formation during play. We will go out in a set formation, and depending on the opposition, may have to change by halftime. So you're absolutely right. You can't say that you're going to play a certain formation an entire season. You've got to adapt.
Do you change a formation if you're attacking or if you're defending?
If we're attacking and we're having success, we may make a formation change where it's an extra forward, depending on who we're trying to isolate. Defensively, if we're having a tough time, we may go a 4-1-4-1 in that situation where we give that extra security player in front of that back two. Sorry,
in front of your two center defenders.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. What about you, Keith? Do you change the shape of your formation when you attacking or defending?
Yeah, it happens naturally. One thing I like about playing the 3-5-2 is the fluidity of it. It automatically. Alex was talking about it. It automatically change on its own. I mean, it automatically becomes a fullback. It automatically becomes a 3-front. It just automatically happens. When we train it, we train it in a way to where the players understand the concepts, understand the basic principles that we're trying to get across. And when they understand that we want to maintain three in the back, we understand what we want our outside mids to do. We understand what we want our front runners to do, playing with their backs to the goal, for example, good with their feet. Then the play naturally it becomes a three front. It becomes a four back naturally. And so if we need to have four in the back, it'll naturally happen. If we need to push three into the attack, it'll naturally happen. Sometimes there's four in the attack. So sometimes there's five in the attack, or there's 4 or 5 in the back. And so that's one thing I like about it is it's not as cookie cutter as some other formations are. The players don't get locked into this 4-4-2 mindset or this 4-3-3 mindset. It's much more fluid, much more dynamic. The organized chaos that I mentioned earlier, it's very chaotic, and that lends itself to being able to be more fluid.
Yeah. All right. Well, guys, I think we've put out some good information there. I think there's a lot of good stuff that coaches, if they listen to this live or listen to it later, are going to get from that. I know there's a lot of coaches who kind of overthink formations. And I think that the last part that we just talked about there was that, like you said, Alex, it's just a starting point. How you impose yourself on the other team or they impose yourself on you determines how that formation is going to change, how those numbers are going to change, I guess. But so Alex, thanks a ton. Keith, thanks a lot for getting on here. I really enjoyed this one because I love talking about different formations, and here looking at a back three and a back. The first time I came across a back three, Alex, I don't know if you were. You may have been, I don't know if you were over here at the time, but it was when Howard Wilkinson took over at Sheffield Wednesday, and they were in the what was the second division then.
Yeah.
And he played with 3 center defenders. Were you in England at the time, or were you over here? This was probably
I came over in 94. I came over.
Oh, so you were in England then at the time, because this was in the late 80s or mid 80s. And he had that team with 3 center defenders, but he had Mel Sterland on the right, a fullback who was more like a winger, and he had, I can't remember who he had on the left, but it was like a 3-5-2 when they were attacking, and a 5-3-2 when they were defending. And they just got promoted easy and caused all kinds of. I think they finished in the top 5 in their first season in the first division again. Can you remember that?
Yes, I do, Mike. Vaguely, I think the big system change was Wimbledon, when Wimbledon came second in the what was the old first division, when they played what was very referred to as boom ball, and it was direct soccer played to the high striker, and I think at that time it was maybe Fashanu was their strike, and it just shocked everybody because everybody got into the same mindset. Like Keith was saying, you can't have every team trying to play the same way because it sometimes becomes counterproductive. So anybody that changes it up, i.e. Leicester, we spoke about Leicester last week and how they changed it up. Well,
another example is in the national team game, Jack Charlton with Ireland.
Yeah.
All the national teams tend to play different than club teams, don't they? They slow the game down a little bit. It's a little more, I wouldn't say relaxed, but it's a slower, more careful game.
Methodical.
It's more methodical. Mistakes are punished a little bit more than in a club team, so they take care of the ball a little bit more. Well, he comes on and he's playing just like, not Wimbledon, but close to it, where he was like, okay, we're going to press with your fullback, whether you play for Germany or Belgium or whoever, your defender, he get that ball. He's not going to have time to stroll out and build it up as we've been letting you in the past. We're going to be on you and force all kinds of mistakes. And he had them doing some incredible stuff and causing incredible problems.
I think the big one, and maybe Keith will remember this, was George Graham at Arsenal when he played with the back 5. Very much the 3 that Keith has set up, but the 2 fullbacks at that time was Lee Dixon and Nigel Winterburn. and the media said that they would never score goals. They scored the most goals in the actual what was then the new EPL. I think they scored 100 goals with the back five.
Yeah, and they didn't used to let many goals in either, did they?
No, mate, we were safe.
All right, well, let's end it there. Keith, thanks so much. Alex, thanks so much. And Alex,
Yeah, thank
we're
you,
going to
mate.
see you on. We're going to see you on Thursday. We're going to talk about VAR. That's going to be a lot of fun. So, anyway, thanks, guys. I really appreciate it.
Thank
We'll end
you.
it there.
Thanks,
and
Keith.
this will be available in the members area and
Thank
on
you,
our
Alex.
YouTube channel as well.